Dawn of the first day reveals a horrifying scene enveloping the valley at the foot of the hill. The dense early morning fog is quickly dispelled not by sunlight, but by the sweltering heat radiating from tens of thousands of torches in the breath of a colossal army. 50,000 troops of the Southern Empire have gathered in full force, forming a sea of people in iron armor stretching endlessly to the horizon. The thundering footsteps of heavy infantry blocks moving in unison create dull vibrations, causing rocks and soil on the hillside to start rolling down crunchily. Facing that destructive power high on the hilltop, a fortress built entirely of large wooden logs by the northern tribe stands solitary and lonely. Inside that shell of ancient oak, a mere 2,000 warriors are silently tightening their grip on weapon handles, determined eyes looking down at the flood of enemies rising from all directions. At the foot of the hill, the Empire's generals begin waving signal flags, ordering the deployment of an encircling formation. Hundreds of scout cavalry separate from the main army, galloping around the foot of the hill to scout the terrain. Horse hooves kicking up blinding dust obscuring the view. Large bronze shields are erected close together, forming moving walls slowly tightening the siege, completely cutting off every solitary path leading down. The air is thick with the smell of iron and bloodlust. The attacking side's engineers begin digging deep trenches and erecting rows of sharp spikes pointing towards the hilltop, establishing a solid confinement position, ensuring no one can escape and not a single grain of rice can get in. Meanwhile, on the highest watchtowers of the wooden fortress, the observers hold their breath watching every move of the enemy. The sound of horns and alarms resonates deeply, weaving through every tunnel nook and defensive fortification. The archers of the northern tribe quickly take position. Bowstrings are pulled taut to the limit, aiming straight at the vanguard squads creeping near the kill zone. A few probing arrows tear through the wind plunging down, embedding deeply into the large wooden shields of the Empire's troops. But that is not enough to slow down the overwhelming marching pace. At the main gate area, the defense troops hurriedly reinforce the latch with massive newly felled tree trunks. They pour cold water onto the wooden walls to prevent fire attacks, while patrol teams run along the combat corridors to recheck the spear reserves. There are no cheers, no boiling rhetoric. Only the deadly silence of 2,000 people knowing they are completely isolated amidst the encirclement of 50,000 aggressive enemies. The 10-day life and death battle is about to begin with a terrible disparity in forces. As the sun just rises to the top of the trees, the sound of the attacking side's battle horns rings out in unison, tearing through the quiet space. From four sides of the hill's foot, thousands of the Empire's vanguard infantry begin moving up the slope, forming square, solid black formation blocks like giant swarms of ants. They raise large rectangular shields, arranged closely together forming a moving iron dome covering their heads, walking rhythmically to avoid parabolic arrows from above. The goal of this first attack wave is to close in on the rampart foot to erect ladders, probing the reaction of the defenders. As soon as the first rows of troops enter effective range, the distance remaining less than 100 paces, a rain of arrows pours down torrentially from the wooden ramparts. The arrows fly covering the sky, plunging down with terrifying speed, slamming into the bronze-rimmed leather shields, creating continuous pattering sounds like hail hitting a roof. Although the shield layer protects very well, but the power of gravity combined with the shot force from stiff crossbows causes many Empire soldiers to collapse when arrows penetrate gaps in armor, pinning their feet tightly to the gravelly ground. However, the stream of people still trudges forward, stepping over comrades' bodies, determined to reach the objective. At the foot of the rampart, chaos explodes as long wooden ladders and iron hook rope ladders are hurriedly erected. Hundreds of Empire infantrymen discard the safety of the shield formation, rushing to grab the ladders, trying to climb up very fast to seize the height advantage. Above on the ramparts, the northern warriors have prepared ready for this moment. They not only use long spears to stab continuously down at those climbing, but also coordinate to push large boulders and round logs weighing hundreds of pounds down below. The rock blocks roll freely, crashing against the wall face, falling straight down onto the crowd jostling below. The sound of bones shattering mixed with the harsh clashing of metal rings out across the hillside. A large ladder carrying full of soldiers climbing halfway is suddenly struck by a giant log from above, breaking in two instantly, flinging dozens of soldiers falling into the abyss. Meanwhile, at the eastern wall section, a group of Empire shock troops has succeeded in throwing iron hooks onto the wooden wall edge and beginning to pull ropes to climb up. Realizing the risk of intrusion, a squad of defense soldiers holding battle axes immediately rushes over, chopping through the thick hemp ropes. High-pitched screams ring out as the attackers lose momentum and fall straight to the ground from a height of over 20 meters. Blood begins to dye red the grass and plants around the rampart foot, bodies piling up on each other, forming obstacles hindering the army behind. The opening siege wave turns into a real meat grinder, where iron and steel collide with wood and stone in a dance of brutal destruction. After the bloody failure of the first assault, the war drums temporarily subside. The Empire's vanguard infantry blocks are ordered to retreat to the rear beyond crossbow range. However, the silence on the battlefield is merely a harbinger of a more devastating storm about to strike. From behind the army lines, heavy towing vehicles with large wooden wheels crushing the ground are rumbling into strategic positions. More than 40 long-range stone throwers assembled from glossy black ironwood trunks and reinforced with iron bands, arranged in a long, continuous horizontal line besieging the southern face of the hill. The sound of twisted animal sinew ropes creaking horribly rings out, signaling the energy-storing spring has been stretched to the limit. Following the flag wave command from the commanding generals, dozens of giant lever arms snap powerfully into the air in unison, creating a chilling whistling sound. Large stone blocks the size of an adult human, chiseled round to optimize flight capability, soaring high then plunging down in a deadly rainbow trajectory. The ground inside the citadel shakes violently when the first volley of stone ammo lands. Unlike stone walls that can absorb impact force, wooden ramparts when hit create harsh cracking sounds like rolling thunder. A large boulder hurtles straight into the western defensive wall section, smashing through 3 layers of thick oak, causing the sturdy structure to suddenly deform and skew. More dangerous than the impact force itself are thousands of sharp wooden splinters flying in all directions like small spears, embedding into the flesh of warriors hiding behind the rampart. Inside the citadel, chaos begins to spread as the defense side is completely helpless against this long-range attack. Archers try to shoot back, but their arrows cannot reach the enemy's machine placement. They are forced to abandon combat positions on the ramparts to find shelter behind warehouse rows or underground bunkers. Interior architectural structures also do not escape destruction. A stray boulder falls onto the roof of the food granary, smashing the thatched roof part and collapsing the entire purlin system underneath. At the southeast corner of the citadel, a watchtower over 10 meters high is hit directly at the base pillar. The sound of wood cracking rings out miserably before the whole tower leans gradually, then collapses, dragging 5 observer warriors falling into the dusty ruins. The bombardment continues ceaselessly throughout that afternoon, turning the solid protective shell of the citadel into something ragged and tattered. There is no direct face-to-face combat, but the psychological pressure from rocks falling from the sky is eroding the fighting will of 2,000 besieged soldiers faster than any sword blade. Night falls, covering the valley with a thick black curtain, but the atmosphere does not become peaceful because of that. The light from thousands of campfires of the Southern Empire army forms a giant ring of light surrounding the foot of the hill, resembling a fire python constricting its prey. The sound of forging weapons and patrol footsteps echoes in the night wind, reminding the defenders that death is still waiting. Fully aware of the terrible danger from the stone thrower array, the northern tribe leaders decide to execute a bold gamble, accepting sacrifice to exchange for a chance of survival. At the third watch, when the fog begins to thicken, obscuring vision, the tiny side gate hidden behind dense thorn bushes on the northern mountain slope quietly opens. A suicide squad of over 100 most elite warriors, bare-chested and smeared with black charcoal to blend into the darkness, silently crawl out. On each person's back, they do not carry heavy armor but wear ceramic jars filled with flammable pitch and pine resin. They move like ghosts, crawling close to the ground, weaving through the enemy's negligent outpost guard stations to approach the assembly area of the giant siege engines. When the distance remains only a few dozen paces, a sound of a dry branch snapping under a warrior's foot alerts the Empire's guards. The shout "Assassins" rings out, tearing through the night, immediately drawing the roaring sound of alarm horns. Knowing they can no longer hide, over 100 black shadows simultaneously spring up, howling savage battle cries, then rushing straight into the fence protecting the machines. Torches are hurriedly lit, thrown straight into the dry wood and oil already poured onto the rotating axles and lever arms of the stone throwers. The fire flares up violently, licking completely over the dry wooden bodies of the deadly machines, turning them into giant torches illuminating a whole corner of the sky. The Empire army, awakened unexpectedly, hurriedly grabs weapons, rushing out from tents in a state of chaos. The northern warriors, after completing the arson mission, immediately draw daggers and short axes, rushing into close combat to hold back the enemy, preventing them from extinguishing the fire. A bloody massacre takes place right beside the blazing bonfires. Axe blades chopping into bare flesh, spear tips piercing through chests, fresh blood spraying profusely into the fire, creating gruesome sizzling sounds. In the flickering firelight, the figures of the suicide soldiers fall one by one under the overwhelming numbers of the Empire army. They fight without retreating, using their own bodies as shields, blocking those bringing water to save the fire. After nearly an hour of fierce fighting, the sound of clashing weapons gradually thins out, then ceases completely. More than 12 stone throwers have been completely burned to ash and charcoal. Wooden frames collapsed, lying askew. In exchange, not a single one of the over 100 suicide warriors returned. Their bodies lie scattered around the piles of ashes, having completed their final mission in tragic glory. On the ramparts, their comrades silently bow their heads in farewell, knowing that sacrifice has bought the citadel a few precious days of holding out. The rage of the Empire generals after last night's raid has transformed into a cruel order as soon as the first light of the new day just breaks. No more tentative probing waves. The Southern Army decides to unleash the heaviest siege weapon that they have painstakingly transported over hundreds of miles of forest and mountain roads. A giant battering ram vehicle, huge as a mobile house, pulled by 60 strong bulls, slowly advancing towards the main gate of the wooden citadel. The entire roof and two sides of the vehicle are covered with water-soaked fresh buffalo hides and thick iron armor, making every effort to shoot fire arrows or throw gravel from above hopeless. The sound of wooden wheels grinding on the gravel ground creates an ear-splitting, screeching sound, mixed with the chanting of 200 muscular soldiers straining to push from behind. Inside the belly of that monster vehicle is a solid ironwood trunk over 10 meters long, the head tipped with cold bronze cast in the shape of a wolf's head, hanging suspended on a system of thick iron chains. Its target is the main gate made of old oak, the final latch separating the fragile safety of the defense side from the sea of enemies outside. When the vehicle approaches close to the gate foot, rapid battle drums sound as the command signal. The control troops inside simultaneously gather momentum, pushing the ironwood trunk rushing forward following pendulum inertia. An earth-shaking boom rings out when the bronze pestle head collides directly with the wood face. The whole citadel shakes like undergoing a violent earthquake. Dust from cracks falls down obscurely. The door latch bars begin to warp, emitting painful cracking sounds like bones being broken. On top of the city gate, the air is scorching hot like a kiln. The defense soldiers have prepared large oil cauldrons boiled furiously since early morning. Just as the vehicle prepares to execute the second strike, 12 boiling oil cauldrons are poured down simultaneously. The scalding hot liquid stream weaves through gaps in the ironclad roof layer, spilling down into the control compartment below and splashing onto the soldiers pushing the vehicle outside. Miserable screaming tears apart the battlefield atmosphere when soldiers' flesh contacts boiling oil. The smell of burnt flesh rises strongly, causing nausea. Not stopping there, hundreds of pine resin-soaked torches continue to be thrown down from the wall like a rain shower. The flame meets the oil, immediately flaring up violently, turning the area in front of the city gate into a bright red sea of fire. Although covered in iron and fresh hide, the terrible heat from the surrounding burning oil sea has turned the vehicle into a mobile kiln, heating the metal cladding plates to red hot. Empire soldiers lucky enough not to be hit by oil also panic and run away, abandoning the pushing position to escape the scorching heat. The battering ram lies motionless amidst the sea of fire. The wheel part begins to catch fire, burning black, but its initial strike has left a large crack running along the main gate body, signaling the inevitable collapse in the coming days. Black smoke billows up, obscuring even the sun, signaling another day of fighting passing in destruction and death. When black smoke from the main gate fire still lingers, obscuring the view, the war has silently shifted direction from the ground down to the dark depths. Realizing direct attacks meet too fierce resistance, the Southern Empire's war engineers decide to deploy the tunneling attack tactic. Hundreds of professional tunnel miners are mobilized, starting to cut the earth from a wind-sheltered area about 50 paces from the rampart foot. They dig narrow tunnels temporarily reinforced with wooden support frames, heading straight for the wooden wall foundation, with the aim of burning the support pillars below, causing the wall to collapse from the root. Inside the citadel, the soldiers with sharpest hearing press their faces to the cold ground, listening for the slightest vibration beat. Bronze water bowls scattered along the wall foot begin to ripple slightly, signaling the enemy is approaching right under their feet. Refusing to sit and wait for death, the defense side immediately digs counter-intercept tunnels. The digging race takes place in a stifling, tense atmosphere, where the sound of pickaxes hitting gravel rings out like death's countdown. The moment the two tunnels intersect is a terrifying nightmare. The final separating soil layer collapses, blinding dust rushes into the faces of those in front. In the narrow space, just enough for two people to walk hunched parallel. Light from sheep fat torches burning flickeringly is not enough to illuminate human faces clearly. A cruel and bizarre battle breaks out right inside the earth. Here, long spears or long swords become hopeless because of entanglement. Warriors discard long weapons, draw daggers, short axes, even use pickaxes and shovels in bare hands to rush at each other. Metal clashing in the tunnel creates harsh sounds, resonating, making soldiers' ears ring. The smell of fresh blood mixed with moldy earth and sweat creates a thick, suffocating atmosphere. One stabs another, the fallen are immediately trampled, corpses becoming obstacles, making movement even more difficult. A northern warrior pinned down to the slushy mud floor, trying to strangle the opponent with hands while the enemy's dagger is stuck deep in his shoulder. In another tunnel branch, the Empire troops, unable to push back the defenders, decide to set fire to oil-soaked wooden support beams. Toxic smoke quickly spreads throughout the underground cave system like gray snakes, strangling the lungs of both sides. Miserable coughing sounds ring out. The defense side is forced to retreat hastily to the surface and seal the tunnel entrance to prevent smoke rising, leaving behind comrades still trapped below. A few watches later, a deep, dull explosion rings out from the earth. The ground above sinks down, creating a gaping, deep pit right next to the wall foot. The wooden wall section above loses its foundation, leaning sharply to one side, creating a large crack threatening to collapse at any moment. Although not yet completely collapsing the wall, the underground battle has left a fatal wound on the citadel's defensive structure, simultaneously burying hundreds of lives from both sides inside the eternal earthen tomb. The sun of the seventh day scorches the arid ground as if wanting to wring out the last bit of vitality remaining inside the wooden citadel. The air now no longer reeks of the fishy smell of blood from the first days, but instead is the smell of death from unburied corpses and the stench rising from festering wounds without medical treatment. Inside the reserve warehouses, the last grains of rice have been scraped clean, divided evenly into small handfuls for warriors still strong enough to hold weapons. Clean water sources, more precious than pure gold at this moment, have been depleted to the tank bottom. Only a layer of turbid, slushy mud remains, squeezed drop by drop to share for the wounded. The shortage does not stop at food. At the watchtowers, bundles of arrows once stacked high have now diminished by more than half. Archers are forced to hold their hands, only allowed to shoot when certain the arrow will embed in the enemy's throat. A terrifying silence covers the defense side, completely contrary to the cheering sound of dishes clashing and the fragrant smell of grilled meat flying with the wind from the Empire camps below. A cruel psychological blow, striking straight into the contracting stomachs of 2,000 besieged people. Noticing the firepower from the citadel has weakened distinctly, the Southern Army begins to push up the encirclement formation, erecting obstacle fences right next to the stone-throwing range of the defense side. They walk around blatantly, provoking and gradually filling the outer trenches, turning the empty ground in front of the city gate into a flat road ready for the general offensive. Facing the critical situation out of arrows is out of life. A reckless and bizarre skirmish broke out right at the foot of the eastern wall in the late afternoon. A group of defense soldiers uses ropes to lower people down to the area full of corpses from previous days. Their goal is not to attack, but to pull back intact arrows sticking in the bodies of enemies and comrades. Detecting this action, the Empire Army immediately dispatches a squad of crossbowmen advancing to shoot torrentially to intercept. In that messy graveyard area, the arrow retrieval soldiers have to roll to dodge bullets, arrows, bolts, having to use daggers to parry incoming crossbow bolts, while the other hand still tries to yank hard on bloody arrow shafts. Blood spills again on the old ground. 3 warriors fall forever beside the soulless bodies, but the remaining ones manage to bundle 2 large bundles of arrows dragged up to the citadel. Each arrow retrieved now is exchanged for a whole life, soaked in the blood of both the shooter and the picker. Meanwhile, in the west, the Empire Army has completed digging a trench cutting across the underground stream leading into the citadel, eliminating the only natural water source. The encirclement of 50,000 troops has now closed so tight that not even a mouse can slip through. The bright red signal flags of the Empire are planted thickly around the hillfort like a forest of blood flowers. Signaling the countdown time for the existence of the wooden citadel is only calculated in hours. Despair begins to creep into the eyes of the defense soldiers, but their hands still grip weapons tightly, preparing for the tragic ending that everyone has predicted. Just as the horn signaling dawn ends, a sound far more majestic and terrifying rings out, moaning across all 4 sides of the valley. That is the sound of war drums beaten simultaneously from all Empire camps, signaling the moment of the decisive general offensive has struck. The ground shakes under the weight of 50,000 troops advancing at once. But what terrifies the defending soldiers most is not that sea of people, but the appearance of 12 giant siege towers looming closer. These towers are built taller than the wooden ramparts, moving on a system of large axle wheels, the whole body covered with water-soaked fresh cowhides to resist fire. They trudge forward like giant wooden monsters, completely shielding the shock infantry blocks hiding inside the tower belly. At the tower top, the Empire's marksman crossbowmen stand in a position significantly higher than the rampart, beginning to pour down a deadly rain of arrows, sweeping away anyone daring to stick their head out from the hiding position on the defensive corridor. When the towers approach the rampart within only a hand's breadth distance, the sound of pulley chains clicking ear-splittingly rings out. Heavy ironclad wooden bridges from the tower top suddenly slam down onto the wooden rampart, forming aerial roads connecting the 2 sides. Immediately, the flood of Empire heavy infantry, equipped with large shields and full iron armor, rushes across the plank bridge, jumping straight inside the combat corridor of the defense side. The combat on the rampart face breaks out with an unprecedented level of cruelty. The advantage of height and wall protection now completely disappears. The northern warriors, though exhausted and hungry, still roar savage battle cries, swinging axes and spears rushing to stop the enemy flow pouring from the tower belly. The narrow space on the rampart turns into a bloody slaughterhouse. A defense warrior uses his whole body to rush in and tackle 2 Empire soldiers, pulling all 3 falling off the rampart to the ground, shattering bones. On the northern wall side, a siege tower is hit by defenders, risking death, throwing dozens of kerosene jars at the base and setting fire. The fire flares up violently, licking the dry wooden frame inside the hide cover, turning the tower into a living torch. Miserable screams ring out as soldiers inside the tower are roasted or forced to jump from a height of over 10 meters to escape. However, that sacrifice is just a drop in the ocean. In the other three directions, the Empire army has captured some important wall sections, establishing solid bridgeheads to bring more reinforcements up high. At the same time, at the main gate, taking advantage of the chaos on the ramparts, the Empire's gate-breaking squad continues using the wall-boring vehicle to attack the old crack. The sound of wood snapping mixed with metal clashing and savage cheering creates a symphony of collapse. The northern soldiers are gradually pushed back from key defensive positions, forced to huddle in small groups, backs against each other, fighting in despair before the sea of shining enemy weapons surrounding all sides. The ceaseless pressure from the stone throwers and the aftershocks of the previously collapsed tunnels finally conquered the endurance of the western wall section. A loud explosion like rolling thunder rings out, followed by the gruesome cracking sound of thousands of wooden trunks shattering at the same time. A whole wall section over 30 meters long, already tilting due to lost foundation, now collapses down, creating a gentle slope full of wood chips and rubble. Dust billows up, rolling to cover even the sunlight. And just as that dust cloud has not yet settled, the battle cry of the Empire army rings out, signaling the true nightmare has begun. Like a flood breaking a dike, thousands of Empire heavy infantrymen rumble over the ruins, trampling on broken wood pieces and human bodies to advance inside the inner city. No longer having the wall for protection, the battle immediately shifts to the most cruel form. Close quarters combat in narrow spaces between house rows and crisscrossing paths inside the city. The surviving northern warriors, though their numbers depleted by more than half, still do not give up. They take advantage of terrain familiarity, retreating deep into nooks and crannies, turning every wooden house, every food warehouse into small fortresses to hold back the enemy. At the old blacksmith area, a group of 10 defense warriors has successfully ambushed an Empire vanguard squad. They hide on low roofs, suddenly jumping down into the middle of the opponent's formation with axes and daggers in hand. In the narrow space of the alley, just enough for 3 people to pass. The advantage in numbers and long spears of the Empire army is completely neutralized. Short axe blades swing up and down brutally, chopping into gaps in iron armor, blood spraying, soaking the surrounding wooden walls. However, that resistance is quickly extinguished when the rear reinforcement layer of the Empire floods in, using large shields to press the defenders tightly into the wall corner and finishing them with simultaneous stabs. Meanwhile, in the central area, the Empire army begins using a cruel tactic to clear resistance pockets, setting fire. Burning torches are thrown straight into thatched roofs and dry wooden walls. The fire flares up violently, spreading fast with the wind, turning the whole western fortress area into a sea of fire. Thick black smoke creeps into every nook and cranny, forcing hiding defense soldiers to rush out to avoid suffocation, only to fall immediately under the rain of arrows from Empire marksmen waiting ready on high rubble piles. The sound of children screaming, if any, already drowned out. The sound of panic-stricken livestock running wild. The sound of popping wood and clashing weapons create a chaotic scene like hell on earth. Blood flows abundantly on the ground, mixing with ash and dust, forming a sticky reddish mud layer under soldiers' feet. Corpses of both sides lie piled up on each other at crossroads, blocking the way. The Empire army, with overwhelming numbers dozens of times larger, slowly tightens the encirclement, herding the last survivors towards the central square located on the highest hilltop. Every step of the invader must be exchanged for blood, but the flood of enemies still trudges forward, crushing all resistance on its path. As the blood-red sunset descends, blending with the colors of fire and blood, what remains of the Northern Tribe Defense Force, barely less than 300 people, has been cornered into a dead end at the beaten earth square in the Citadel center. Around them, The Empire army's encirclement is dense like a moving iron wall. Layer upon layer of shining shields and armor reflecting the flickering firelight. No way back, no hope of reinforcement, and no offer of surrender is made. In the brief moment of silence before the end, only the heavy gasping of exhausted soldiers and the crackling of fire from burning houses around remain. The finishing command rings out coldly from the Empire generals. Instead of rushing into melee immediately, thousands of archers and crossbowmen of the attacking side are ordered to step forward, drawing bows aiming straight at the crowd, huddling in the middle of the square. The sound of bowstrings snapping in unison creates a chilling, deadly sound. Hundreds of pitch-black arrows tear through the wind, plunging down. The northern warriors, with wooden shields already cracked and armor tattered after 10 days of death battle, trying to shield each other in despair. One by one they fall, bodies riddled with arrows. But that circular formation block still does not break. The living immediately close ranks covering the position of the one just fallen. When the arrow supply has depleted, the Empire's heavy infantry formation begins to advance to execute the finishing strike. The thundering footsteps compress the survival space of the death defenders. The final skirmish breaks out, no longer bearing the shape of methodical combat technique, but is the most instinctual and frenzied struggle. Northern warriors discard broken spears, draw daggers, pick up stones, even use teeth to attack any enemy within reach. A huge warrior, pierced through the chest by 3 Empire spears, still tries to struggle up, using the last bit of strength to rush and hug tightly an enemy soldier, both rolling into a blazing fire nearby. Blood flows in small streams weaving through cracked earth crevices. Roaring screams fade, replaced by the sound of metal stabbing into flesh, repeating ruthlessly. The tattered tribal signal flag, proudly planted in the square for the past 10 days, is finally chopped broken, falling down into the black mud under the feet of the victorious army. When the last northern warrior falls with a broken sword in hand, around him are bodies of dozens of Empire soldiers lying scattered, proof of extraordinary resistance to the last moment. Night falls completely also when the fire swallows the entire wooden citadel. The Empire army begins to withdraw from the fire zone, leaving behind a giant pile of ashes glowing bright in a corner of the border sky. Victory has belonged to the ones stronger in numbers and equipment, but the price paid is the blood and bones of thousands of soldiers lying scattered from the hill foot to the top. Amidst the wind whistling through charred ruins, no more cheering of victory. Only eternal silence covers the common grave of 2,000 people who kept the oath to protect the land to the last breath.